vibes here to help raise your awareness. Let's take a collective deep breath. Inhale through your nose. Exhale. Wholeness. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a number of things, particularly pertaining the tunnels of Set, the tree of life, being a light worker, and being a shadow worker. All right. Now, I'm going to start off with, just kind of explaining the tunnels, all right, and the tree of life. So, think of the tree of life, right, of it having various spheres, okay? These spheres are what are known as the tunnels. So, most people circumnavigate through these tunnels. Now, a lot of people come and they begin their journey, right, as light workers, and they go into these tunnels, these dark tunnels, or these spheres, right? These spheres are full of darkness, okay? And each sphere is different, right? Every sphere that you circumnavigate is different, but a lot of times light workers are navigating through these tunnels, and they're shining this light, which tends to draw a lot of attention to them. And because it draws attention to them, it tends to taint that light. Okay? Now, there's this thing called a clipothic experience where you go over a lesson over and over and over again until you learn that lesson. Now, some people spend an entire lifetime just going through the same sphere, on repeat over and over and over again because they never learned that lesson. And sometimes they might start as a light worker and end up as a shadow worker, circumnavigating that sphere. Okay? Now, when you finish navigating a sphere, you move on to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one until you pretty much circumnavigate the entire tree, right? And then what happens is you can drop into any sphere at any moment in time whenever you want to, right? And go through these lessons over and over and over again, okay? So that's kind of like the light worker aspect of things. So they go into these tunnels wanting to shine the light. And I'm not saying this happens to everybody, right? Because in order to continue to maintain that frequency, that vibration of light and love, you have to maintain that frequency of love. All right? You can't let anything that is happening in this world taint that energy of love. All right? Now that's an extremely difficult task. Okay? So I salute anybody who is able to maintain that frequency and not let anything that is happening in the world to kind of pull them out of that. Okay. Now, on the other end of the tunnel, right, you have the shadow workers. Right. Now, these are people who circumnavigate these tunnels in the darkness. Right. So they can't necessarily see where they're going, and they can't see the obstacles and the various entities that the light workers can see. Right. So the light workers will experience. They'll know. When these entities are latching onto them. All right, and now their job as a light worker is to maintain that frequency of love and that vibration no matter what type of attack that they basically get hit with. And that's an extremely difficult task. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I do know various light workers who are able to handle it. Okay, not everybody's able to do this. All right, then you have the shadow workers who go through these tunnels and they circumnavigate the tunnels in the darkness. Right? So with the shadow workers, for them, they consistently bump into obstacles, challenges, even entities. All right? And with the shadow work, it's more about learning how to see in the dark, learning how to circumnavigate in the darkness. Right? So they're able to learn how to utilize, right, their senses to basically circumnavigate through these tunnels of Set. All right, and each tunnel they go to is different up until they reach the top of the tree. Likewise, you have the tree of death, which is the opposite of it, right? That's the root of the tree, and then you have the tree of life, which is above it, right? But the root in itself is a reflection of the tree. So the taller the tree, right, the bigger the tree, the deeper the roots. All right? So within every sphere you face, you're going to be facing both the light and the darkness aspect of things. Okay? Now, there are people who tend to find the middle ground, who can, hop between being a light worker and then being a shadow worker. And there's this type of chi called the yang type of chi. It's not yin and it's not yang, it's yang, Yeung. Okay? Now, this is finding the neutral balance between the shadow and the light. Okay? These are people who are able to go between, both spheres. Not everybody can do this, mind you. All right? Most people tend to stick to one type of, chi, one type of, archetype, and they have a hard time switching over. All right, a lot of times too, what can happen is situations can happen in one's life that forces them to switch over to becoming a shadow worker, right? So imagine as a light worker, you're floating through these tunnels and a bunch of entities keep attacking you and you can't maintain that vibration of love. Usually what happens is you go through something known as a clipothic experience, where you recycle the experience. You go through the experience over and over and over again until you learn your lesson. And a lot of times what happens is, in order to learn that lesson, people will go from being that light worker and they will go into the shadows. Now, just because you're, a shadow worker, it does not necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. I want people to remove that idea out of their mind that, oh, he's working with the shadows, so he's evil and he's bad. All right? Good and evil are just your own perception. Okay? It comes down to your own, what's the best way to put it? Like, your own awareness, your own sense of awareness. All right? Something might be good to you, but it might be bad to somebody else, and vice versa. Okay? Now, in the world today, we're constantly battling between the light and the shadow, right? And there's very few who can go through that mutual ground, right? The heretics, usually in their design, they would be seen as 5 lines, people who are problem solvers, all right? So the heretics tend to problem solve, and they tend to find the middle ground of all these experiences, okay? Now, and then there's also like rare cases, like a 6th line can also be in that type of energy as well, where they're neutral because they've been able to embody every single aspect of all the lines, right, of all the profiles, right? So you're circumnavigating these tunnels and you don't learn your lesson, you repeat them, and you might have to dive into your shadow to basically make it through to the next sphere. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's periods in our lives where you need to dive into the things that you're afraid of diving into. You need to learn how to utilize your senses as opposed to shining your light everywhere, right? And then there's other times where you need to shine your light everywhere as opposed to, utilizing your senses, okay? Now, again, there's people, all right, who will just maintain that vibrational frequency of love throughout the entire experience. It doesn't matter if people are criticizing them, trying to kill them, trying to destroy them, whatever the case may be, they maintain in that frequency of love and they overcome these circumstances. Okay, so to maintain that blissful state is extremely difficult. That's why a lot of people tend to go into the shadows. And it's very human of them to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. And they learn how to utilize their senses. And what happens oftentimes is that they utilize the shadows, but then they go back to the light. All right? And sometimes what will happen is people will realize that, oh, I work better with the shadows. I work better with utilizing my senses. I work better with utilizing my aura, all right, in this aspect, okay? So now let's take this out of the esoteric frame and bring it into a societal aspect of things, right? So you would see a light worker as somebody who is, I'll use this word, right? A stoic guru or a sage. All right, they're usually sages, okay? And even the sages, some of them could be diving into the darkness, but majority of them tend to hold this vibrational frequency of love, and they maintain that frequency, and everything is just love, okay? And even though they may get criticized, or they may, the thing is about being in the light aspect of things is that they're not necessarily out here for, fame and recognition and fortune and these earthly desires, if that makes sense, right? Whereas a shadow worker, right, will utilize these tools, right? These, like making six figures, or, creating like a cult or a base of people who tend to follow them, right? And they utilize this by tapping into people's senses, making them feel a certain type of way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, like I want to emphasize that there's nothing wrong with these things as long as it doesn't lead people towards a path of destruction. Because there's a lot of people out here who don't know about these hidden informations like the occult, right? They don't understand the shadows. They don't understand the hidden aspect of society, all right? The subconscious aspects of the society. And so the shadow workers tend to guide people in this way. And as long as it's not towards a path of destruction, right? This is actually something that can help people, okay? That can help guide people towards them figuring out whether, what their higher self wants them to do, whether they want to go down the path of light or they want to go down the path of darkness. And again, mind you, just because you start off as a shadow worker doesn't mean you're going to end up being a shadow worker the entire time. And likewise, you can start off as a light worker. It doesn't mean you're going to be, a light worker the entire time. You might dive into the shadows, right? And I'll give you an example, and I'll just use a biblical text just because people are familiar with this, okay? Jesus was a prime example of a light worker. He carried that Christ chi, all right? I'm saying the Christ chi, the energy, inner chi, all right? He carried that type of chi with him, and then he used that everywhere he went. That's why he was able to be a martyr for society, okay? Now, there was an instance in his journey. Now, whether you believe in this or not, I'm just going by the story. This is a story that the mind can digest and comprehend. So it's not about your beliefs. Has nothing to do with beliefs, all right? Now, in this story, what happens is there's a moment in time in which he went ahead and he flipped the table and he began to whip people in the temple when he realized that they had turned the church or the temple of God, right, into a marketplace. Okay, and that's something that he didn't necessarily enjoy, and so the shadow came out of him. But then he was able to revert back into the light work, right? And that's an example of how, people go from being light workers to working in the shadows. Okay, now that was just an example, and there's many various examples, right, of throughout our entire history. I'm pretty sure there's stories that you guys can find and pick up and correlate, even within your own lives, where you maintain that frequency of love, but people try you, right? And so you jump into the shadows real quick and then jump back out, right? Now, in regards to the shadow worker, right? What does that look like in society? In regards to the shadow workers, it will definitely dive into perhaps the control of vibrational resonance frequency and the utilization of the illusion, media, which is the screen, all right? The black screen, the illusion, the media, all right? Now, a lot of times, shadow workers would be seen as artists, musicians, and so forth and so on. Majority of them are, all right? Even actors, actresses. Remember, I gave you the characteristics of shadow workers. They usually tend to have a cult following, and they tend to, help people tap into their senses. And so I'm just utilizing the example of these beings, okay? So that would be an example of, a shadow worker, right? It doesn't matter even if they are making music or they're utilizing vibrational frequency to alter senses, and they're utilizing that to do it in a positive way, because I do know some artists who do that, right? It doesn't mean that those artists are light workers. They could be talking about love and light all they want. They could be preaching about that all they want in their work and in their music. That is a prime example of shadow work, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and end that there. I hope you guys find that informative. If you are looking to book a consultation with me, click the link in my bio. All the information should be there. Also, check out the Patreon. I have tons of information that I put in there and a lot of content that I feel like you guys would genuinely enjoy. So without further ado, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I look forward to connecting with you all again very soon. Peace.